The Phantom Menace is a movie that I've kind of gone through stages with. When I was a little kid, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I thought Obi-Wan was cool. I loved the fight with Darth Maul. I loved The Phantom Menace when I was a little kid. And then I got older, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I got really bored. I thought there was a lot of dumb stuff in the movie. And I have not seen this movie in a long time. This is my first time watching it through adult eyes. I haven't seen this movie since 2015. That was the last time I watched it. And so now I rewatched it for the first time in several years. So today I'm just going to be talking about how I feel about it now, breaking it down into the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because believe it or not, there are good things in this movie. I know some people do not like this movie at all, but there are some good things this does. So let's start out with the good. One of the things I really enjoy about this movie that the Disney movies definitely make me appreciate a lot more in this is the planets. Specifically Naboo, because if you think about the other Star Wars movies, you go to one point on a planet and you're supposed to believe that the entire planet looks just like that. You go to that one part on Hoth, the entire planet looks just like that. You go to one part on Tatooine, the entire planet looks just like that. But on Naboo, it's very different. You've got Theed, which is the city part, basically space Italy right there. Then you've got the field that they fight in, the Windows XP background for the very end battle with the Gungans and the droids. You've also got the jungle environment, and then you've got the underwater area where the Gungans live and the planet's core. It's a varied planet, which again, we don't get a whole lot of that in Star Wars. Generally speaking, most planets, one part, you see that part of the planet, it's like, okay, the entire planet looks like that, but not with Naboo, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then we also got to see Coruscant, which, you know, basically Blade Runner, but still, it was cool seeing Coruscant. I like Coruscant, and again, that's another planet to where, like, the Palpatine, I believe Palpatine or Qui-Gon or someone even tells you, like, the entire planet is a giant city. So I really liked the creativity with the planets in this movie. And of course, another good thing about this movie is Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Now I know most people enjoy Obi-Wan in this movie, but not everyone likes Qui-Gon. Some people think he's boring, but I honestly think Qui-Gon's really interesting because he's different than most other Jedi, and also he's a complete just slime ball. That's my favorite part about Qui-Gon. And I know a lot of people think, oh wow, wait, what do you mean? He's like one of the most respectable Jedi. He's always doing the right thing and stuff. But Qui-Gon's this guy that, yes, he's not evil or anything like that, but he will do anything to get what he wants, and it's not like he's necessarily going to go down the good path first. It's not like he's going to go through the noble and righteous way first, like the correct way of doing things. He just goes the effective way. And what I mean by that is, if you watch the movie, his the first thing he does every time is mind trick. He doesn't even hesitate. He doesn't try to talk to him first and, oh, maybe I can just actually talk to him man to man and they'll, you know, give me what I want. No, he immediately goes to mind trick.
And speeder's on her way. We could use a transporter. Your gods demand that his life belongs to me now. But credits will do fine.
No, they won't.
Credits will do fine.
No!
I just think it's funny how Qui-Gon spams Jedi mind trick like it's a cheap move in a video game, and he's the only Jedi that we really know of that does that. He doesn't try anything else first, he just immediately just like mind trick. He does not care, and I love that about Qui-Gon, because a lot of the other Jedis are very stoic and noble and everything, but Qui-Gon, while he is kind of a stoic Jedi, he just immediately goes to mind trick and does whatever he needs to get the job done. And he's also very doom and gloom. I love that as well. Every time he meets someone, it's another tactic to get what he wants. Every time he meets someone, he immediately gives them the worst case scenario for their current situation.
You hear that?
Yeah?
That is the sound of 1,000 terrible things heading this way. A droid army is about to attack the Naboo. They will kill you if you stay.
Yeah, there's no like hope or anything in Qui-Gon when he first meets people. He just immediately goes to, here is the worst case scenario and what's probably going to happen if you don't listen to me. And it's great. Now, as much as Qui-Gon is a sleazeball and I love him for it, it is admirable how he's the only one that actually cares about Anakin. Because throughout this movie, you see that poor Anakin is this slave kid that finally gets freed from slavery, but taken from his mother with complete strangers, like people he just met 10 minutes ago, and now he's on this new planet. He's never been off planet from Tatooine before, and everyone's just like, Obi-Wan couldn't care less about him. The council are just complete dicks to him. Padme's nice to him, but that's it. And Qui-Gon's like the only one that really cares about him. Like, Padme's nice to him, but Qui-Gon's the only one that truly cares about him. So there's that to Qui-Gon's character as well. He's not just this slime ball that goes around trying to get whatever he wants. There are good qualities to him, such as him actually caring about Anakin, unlike everyone else. I do gotta say though that when Watto and Qui-Gon make that deal of if Anakin wins, then Watto can keep all the winnings minus the parts that Qui-Gon needs. I fully believe that if Anakin would have lost, like crashed and burned or not come in first place, then Qui-Gon would have just straight up murdered Watto, just without hesitation, to get the parts that they needed. I think because he wanted to get to free Anakin, that's why he did that bet. But I think if Anakin failed, he would have just like, oh well, whipped out his lightsaber, murdered Watto immediately, and taken the parts. Because that's the type of character Qui-Gon is. And then Obi-Wan's very quippy and sarcastic. I love it.
What's this?
A local. Relax.
You overdid it.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short.
There it is. There it is. Everything.
And I like their relationship too, but it's also kind of a drawback of the movie because I wish we had more of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, because the little bit we get of them is great, and I love them talking to each other, and I like their bad cop routine with Jar Jar, when they're talking to Jar Jar and they're both just like, hey, if you don't, take us to some type of safety, the droids are going to come and kill us and murder us and torture us and everything bad that could ever happen. And it's great how they're both in on it. Like, this isn't their first time like doing this technique on someone. Like, you can tell that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have been in this situation before where they've used this technique of just like, let's go all doom and gloom on this person to get what we want, and they do it to Jar Jar flawlessly, and it's great. But again, it's kind of a drawback because I wanted more of that, because most of the movie is just Qui-Gon being like, hey, yeah, Obi-Wan's ready to move on from me. I don't really want Obi-Wan anymore. Give me Anakin, the new kid, the chosen one. I want him. It's very much like you get kind of the sense of Qui-Gon's onto the new shiny toy and he's done with Obi-Wan. So I would have liked to see more Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. That would have been cool. I know they did books and stuff and Legends, but it would have been cool to see it actually in the movies, because the little bit that they did have together, I liked it and I thought they had good chemistry, and I would have liked to see more. Palpatine is another great part of this movie. As boring as the politics are, the best part is seeing him finagle his way through everything and just manipulate Padme into making him Chancellor, because his whole goal is to convince Padme that Chancellor Valorum is not to be trusted, and he's being controlled by like these bureaucrats, and you can't trust him, and he won't help Naboo. Like, the whole time he's like whispering in her ear, like, your people are getting slaughtered while this Chancellor Valorum's doing nothing. If only we had a strong leader that could do something. If only we had some leader that had the balls to stand up to these bureaucrats and help Naboo. But, oh well, looks like just your people are going to get slaughtered in the meantime. If only there was someone that could start a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum so we could get a new Chancellor. I don't know who that new Chancellor would be, but just anyone would be better than this guy. And then, surprise, surprise, Palpatine gets nominated to be Chancellor after Padme starts the vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. And then he comes in, that's where we get, the meme line of a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one, when him and like Panaka come in and they're like, you'll never guess who got nominated to be Chancellor. It was Palpatine. Palpatine's like, oh, I'm so surprised. I never thought this would happen in a million years, but people voted for me. And it's great. And there are like several scenes of like Palpatine like behind Padme saying something and then smirking, like doing this super evil smirk. And yeah, Palpatine's just great. He's obviously one of the best parts of the prequels because he's just so evil and he loves being evil. George Lucas talked about time and time again in the behind the scenes how he's literally supposed to be the devil, like he's supposed to be Satan, just evil incarnate. And Ian McDiarmid does such a great job as him, and he's great in this, even though he's not in the movie a whole lot and the politics stuff is boring. He is by far the best part of the political spectrum of this movie, seeing Palpatine just manipulate Padme into getting him to be Chancellor. It's great. Pod racing is cool. I'm sorry, I know some people think it's really dumb and some people hate it. It's like, it's stupid, I don't like it, but I love pod racing. I love the entirety of that whole sequence. I think it's great. The only thing, not the entirety, the only thing I don't like about the pod racing sequence is how Anakin starts like a whole lap behind, because Sebulba went and tinkered with his pod racer, so that way he can't start immediately and he's a whole lap behind. I thought that was unnecessary. I thought it was dumb because it's like, wow, his pod racer is really that fast that he starts a whole lap behind and catches up to everyone. That was kind of dumb. I would have liked it to more have been like, oh, Anakin's, Jedi reflexes like we talked about earlier, and his skill is why he's able to catch up, not just, hey, his pod racer faster than everyone, even though he made it. But still, I thought that was kind of dumb. Other than that, I love everything else to do with pod racing, because if you think about it, you think about the context of pod racing, it is the sport of the people of Tatooine. when Qui-Gon and the others are talking about Tatooine, like him and Panaka are talking about Tatooine on Padme's ship after it gets damaged, and they're talking about where to land, they're like, we can't land there because the Trade Federation runs that planet, so obviously as soon as we go there, they're going to know it's Padme, and they're going to take her in and have her sign the treaty. They're like, what about Tatooine? We're like, Tatooine's not run by the Republic or the Trade Federation, it's run by the Hutts, and like, the Hutts are gangsters, like, you know, it's this place of just scum and villainy, it's an awful place, but they're like, yeah, but no one's going to be looking for her there, so we can go land there. So it's established that Tatooine is an awful place. We already knew that from A New Hope, but even if you haven't seen A New Hope, you watch this movie, it's established that Tatooine is an awful place run by gangsters with terrible people. When you go around the city, when you go, you see that everything's just terrible. Everyone's all mean. Sebulba's a piece of garbage. Everyone there, aside from like Anakin and Shmi and that old lady whose bones are aching.
Oh, my bones are aching.
No one seems to care that her bones are aching. That poor woman. They're just talking to her, and she's like, "Oh, Annie, my bones are aching," and no one reacts. And Annie's like, "Hey, come here, strangers that I just met today. You can come into my home, but old lady that I talk to every day who's about to die, you stay outside the sandstorm." But anyways, getting distracted. Tatooine's an awful place, and so you think, what would be the sport of that place? Like, what would be their sport? Of course their sport is pod racing. What is pod racing? Pod racing is a death race where everyone is constantly cheating to get the upper hand and no one cares. And Tusken Raiders are shooting at you. And just, it's the most, like, dirty sport. And it fits Tatooine perfectly. Like, when you watch pod racing, it's just a bunch of aliens, like, cursing at each other while cheating, trying to kill each other so they can win. Like, the goal's not even necessarily to finish first. Sometimes the goal is just to be the only person that finishes, and thus you finish first. Like, it's great. I love that. I love pod racing. When you think about the context of it being the sport of Tatooine, it fits perfectly, and everything about that sequence, again, besides Anakin starting to lap down, I think that's done. Everything else is great, and the wooden acting of like Padme being like, "Look, here they come," and stuff like that. That's bad, but the sequence itself is really cool. I love the fact that George Lucas chose not to use any music until the final lap. Up until then, it's all just the sound effects of the pod racers, and the sound design is fantastic. And you're just hearing the aliens, you're just hearing like the different aliens yell at each other, and Anakin flipping his switches, and all the different pod racer engine noises, and it's awesome. And I just love it. It's shot so well. And again, the degenerates in the stand cheering when someone explodes is great. And it's just, I love pod racing. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I personally love it, and I think it's great. And it's one of the best parts of the movie. And pretty much the last of the good category is the final battle between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul. I know some people don't like it. They think it's a dance sequence. They feel like it's too choreographed. But I feel like it's not. I feel like it does a great job of showing the Jedi in their prime, especially once Qui-Gon dies and we get to Obi-Wan and Darth Maul. They've even talked about in the behind the scenes for that fight how they had to use like the lens or something with the camera to change the speed because Ray Park and Ewan McGregor were too fast in that fight. Like, they were too fast. Generally, you know, they have to speed things up in fights like this to make it look better, but for this they had to slow them down because they were going too fast because they're both so into it and so good.
After Liam's down, where me and Ray, we just had it so well rehearsed. They were having to overcrank the camera to slow it down a bit because we were so fast. I'm not joking. It's usually the opposite. They undercrank the camera to speed it up a bit, but we were doing it so fast they thought no one's going to believe it, so they slowed it down a little bit.
And you can see that, like, in that final battle, because the fight with Qui-Gon's really cool. But then once Obi-Wan and it's just Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, man, do things pick up. It goes all the way to 11. The dial changes, and it is amazing. I love it. And also, I love where the fight takes place. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in terms of that place would be awful to like work at because it's like the shield generator or whatever of like the palace for Theed. I don't know, something like that. And imagine if you don't have Jedi Force powers to be able to jump up and down. Like, I know in the Phantom Menace video game they had elevators. I'm assuming they have that actually in the movie as well. But man, that'd be so a pain. Like, imagine if someone's like, "Hey, dude, you got to go fix like this one switch in like Sector 3 level 200, have fun," and it just takes you like 8 hours to get there because you're walking across these bridges, taking these elevators. Just like, this sucks. So in that context, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But for a place for the Jedi and Sith to fight, it is awesome. It looks so cool, and it's one of my favorite areas where a fight takes place in Star Wars. I think it looks awesome. And I really like the way the fight plays out. I like how physical it is. There's like some punching and kicking and backhands, and I like that. I think the choreography for the fight was really good, and I love the final moment, even though it doesn't make sense, of Obi-Wan jumping over Darth Maul from the pit and then slicing him in half, and Darth Maul not dying because his hate held him together, which is so dumb. But anyway, I like that moment, even though it doesn't make sense, because it's like, why is Darth Maul just staring at him in astonishment and getting sliced in half when he could easily just kill Obi-Wan? But that being said, it's Star Wars, and I like that moment. I think it's cool when the binary sunset / the Force theme starts playing. Obi-Wan like sort of closes his eyes, focuses on Qui-Gon's lightsaber, brings it to him, and uses his master's lightsaber to kill the man that just killed his master. I think that's cool, and I like that final battle. I think it's really cool, and I also like basically the entirety of that assault on Theed. I think taking over the palace was cool. When they're fighting all the droids and everything. Not the Gungans fighting the droids on the Windows XP background. That's pretty dumb, but the assault on Theed is pretty cool in general. Now on to the bad, and boy, is there a lot here. The Force speed is one of the things that I don't think gets talked about enough in this movie as being really dumb, because it's one of those things that they use it once and then they never use it again. Like, why would you have such a great power and then never use it? And also causes problems for the rest of the Star Wars movies. It's sort of like when Disney introduced Force Healing. Force Healing's cool and all in a Star Wars video game, but in a movie it makes no sense, and it adds problems to the other movies, because it's like, hey, when Qui-Gon gets stabbed, why don't you just heal him? Hey, when Anakin gets his hand cut off, why don't you just heal it? Like, there's all these different moments where it's like, you could have just healed it and stopped all these things from happening that Force Heal brought problems to. Same with Force Speed. Like the ending of the movie when you have those like shield generator doors or whatever that like periodically go on and off. It's like, Obi-Wan, if you want to catch up to Qui-Gon, just use Force speed like you did earlier in the movie, and you can catch up to him and help him fight Darth Maul. But instead he doesn't do it. And there's a bunch of moments in Star Wars where Force speed would have been very helpful. And so them introducing Force speed here at the very beginning makes no sense, because it's never used again, and it's such a useful tool that you think they would have used it. But yeah, also droidicas are really cool. But you think the Trade Federation would have produced more of them? Because droids are useless. The droids are just there to get cut down by the Jedi and die. Like, they are pointless. So if 20 battle droids are the same cost as one droidica, I'm sorry, it's worth spending the money to make just purely droidicas. If I was the Trade Federation, I'm doing that, because even Jedis run from droidica. So, I would have done that. The destroyer droids are great. I would have just put all my money into producing them, but the Trade Federation didn't really do that. They weren't too smart. Probably the dumbest thing in this movie is Midichlorians. It's really dumb, because the Force, as explained to us by Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, was just the best explanation. It was great. It was mystical and magical. It wasn't too exact. There's wiggle room there. It was great. It made sense. It's like, okay, I understand the Force now. I understand exactly what I need to know about the Force. And then the Phantom Menace takes all the mystical, magical element out of it and makes it scientific. And it's like, there's an exact reason why someone is so powerful in the Force, because it's in your blood. There's these things called Midichlorians, and it's like, it's so dumb. It demystifies the Force, and it was probably the dumbest thing they did in this movie in terms of decisions for the lore. It was terrible. I don't know why George Lucas did this. It makes no sense why the same guy that wrote all those lines for Yoda then came up with this in The Phantom Menace. It's really dumb. I get they needed to have something for why Qui-Gon would know that Anakin is this powerful in the Force, so they're like, what do we do? We'll just have something in his blood. Guess that makes sense. It doesn't. You could have just had Qui-Gon sense it or something. There's so many times where people just sense stuff in the Force, and it's like, okay, I can buy that. But in this, they're like, nah, let me send a blood sample from this child to Obi-Wan and have him scan it for Midichlorians. It's so dumb. A lot of people's biggest problem with this movie is Jar Jar. I honestly don't care about Jar Jar. He's annoying. They do some dumb jokes with him, but he's not the problem with this movie. He's a problem, but not the problem. And he doesn't really ruin the movie for me. It's just like, it's annoying. They did a fart joke with Jar Jar. He's grabbing some fruit off the table with his super long tongue. I don't really care for Jar Jar, but I don't hate him either. But he is definitely part of the bad in this movie. And if you take him out, or if you just change his character a little bit, because he does play a big part in the movie. If you change some things about him, then it would have been way better. But again, I don't have the biggest problem with Jar Jar, but he is definitely not a good part of this movie. So I had to mention him in the bad because he is annoying. There are dumb jokes. He's really over the top. I get he was there as like a funny thing for kids, but it was not executed well. Yeah, it's just not done well, especially considering when you're thinking about funny things for kids. There's plenty of that with C-3PO and R2 in the original trilogy, and it wasn't really cringy and dumb and just bad like Jar Jar. The worst is him accidentally taking out a bunch of droids in the final battle. Like, you have the droidicas who the Jedi ran away from, and you have Jar Jar accidentally killing some droidicas, and it's just, how? Why? Why did you need to do that? And on the note of accidentally doing things, you have Anakin accidentally taking out the entire, like, Trade Federation control ship that controls all the droids. Again, why? Like, why did you need to do this? I get it, like, there are other things to where, okay, I get it, he's good at pod racing, he's the chosen one, all this other stuff, but him accidentally taking out the Trade Federation ship when you have all these other, like, Naboo pilots out there doing their thing, it was really stupid, and the whole sequence is bad. Jake Lloyd just, like, pretended, like, whoa, I'll try spinning, that's a good trick, as much as that's one of the best part of the movies now. It's very... It initially was not. Now it's just been kind of memed to death. I'll try spinning. That's a good trick. But when he gets inside the ship, he's talking to R2. He's like, oh no, R2 was. It's just... It's so bad. And it's a really dumb moment in the movie. And of course, bad acting and clunky dialogue plague this movie. The dialogue is horrendous for a lot of it, especially between Anakin and Padme. That's a trend throughout the entirety of the prequels. But man, when they first meet and Anakin looks at her and is just like, I know the move to use on her. I'm gonna call her an angel. That's what I'm gonna do. And it's just so bad. It's like, are you an angel? I've heard the deep space pilots talk about him. It's so bad. It's so bad. There was no one here to keep George Lucas in check. He just had a bunch of yes men telling him, yeah, George, you're the genius that created Star Wars. So this dialogue's great. Unlike in the original trilogy, you had Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Sir Alec Guinness, like all of them telling him, hey, this dialogue sucks. You can't say this stuff. People don't talk like this. And this one, you know, that was, you know, beginning filmmaker George Lucas, unproven. This is genius that created Star Wars. So he has all these yes men around him. They're like, yep, George, that sounds amazing. And on top of the clunky dialogue, you have some not so great acting from Jake Lloyd and Natalie Portman and a lot of other people, but those two are the main two that, it's rough. Natalie Portman just looks like she's dead inside throughout the entire movie. Like, it just seems like she's a reanimated corpse. I don't know what it is. I don't know if George Lucas told her to act like that or what, because Natalie Portman we've seen in other movies is great, but in the prequel trilogy, she's awful. And in this movie, it's really bad. And Jake Lloyd's a little kid that I don't think had really acted in much or anything before this, or much at all before this, and he didn't exactly do a great job in this movie. And the thing is, they're two very big parts of the movie. Ewan McGregor obviously has a great job, and there are, you know, people that do good, but then there's just, man, Natalie Portman and Jake Lloyd did not do so well. And again, the dialogue doesn't help do anyone any favors, but that's one of the things that plagues the prequels, is some bad acting, some really bad dialogue. The pacing in this movie is also really bad. It goes from, so you start on the Trade Federation ship, you're interested in what's going on, even though they're talking about trade routes and stuff, but then they immediately start fighting some battle droids, and then they go to Naboo, and they go to Otoh Gunga. As dumb as the Gungans are, Otoh Gunga is a really cool place, and then they go through the planet core, and that's interesting, and then they go and they save Padme and her buddies, and they go from there into space, and we get a space battle, then we go to Tatooine, things slow down a bit, we're learning about Anakin, stuff gets really cringy, and then we get pod racing, it's awesome, and then we go to Coruscant, and the movie hits a wall. It's really bad. Once you get to Coruscant, it's just politics, just political mumbo jumbo, and it's like, oh, the trade routes, this, that, and the other, no, these guys took over Naboo. No, I didn't take it over Naboo. Yes, you did. Yes, you did take over Naboo, and it's so bad. It's the worst, and you just get these boring ass politics that just slow down the movie so much. Like, the watching them go around Tatooine is pretty boring until pod racing happens, and then the entirety of Coruscant is incredibly boring. There's nothing interesting going on there other than Palpatine doing his thing. Other than that, it's bad. And we also get the whole part on Naboo where they go back to Naboo and they talk to the Gungans, and we get this moment that's supposed to be cool and sweet where it's like, oh yeah, the Gungans and the people in Naboo, you know, they're doing a peace treaty and they're gonna take down the Trade Federation together. But you don't care. And it's like a 10-15 minute scene of like Padme being like, hi, I am actually the real Padme Amidala. This is my decoy. We are here with you. And then you get Boss Ass going, yeah, like shaking his tongue around, and it's like, I don't care about any of this. Please get to something interesting. To me, the ugly of this movie is Anakin's backstory. And what I mean by that is that Anakin's backstory is really good on paper, but the execution of it is abysmal. If you think about it, this guy is Darth Vader. This is our first time seeing his actual backstory and what he did prior to becoming Darth Vader and how he got there. And you think about his story, he's this kid that was fatherless, never had a father. He grew up with his mom who was a slave, and he grew up in slavery on this desert planet that sucks. No one likes Tatooine. No one at all likes Tatooine other than like Jabba. And of this poor kid born into slavery where his mom's a slave on this terrible planet up until he's 10 years old. And then the Jedi come, these people that he had heard about, these like ancient sort of warriors that he had heard about, they show up and they're like, hey, we can help you. And he gets out of there, but in turn he leaves his mother, the one person, the only person he's ever loved in his entire life. At 10 years old, he gets taken away from his mother, and then when he goes to the Jedi, they basically make fun of him and tell him he sucks and that, hey, you missing your mother is wrong, and that's a bad emotion. You're not supposed to have that emotion because that will lead to all these other bad things.
Afraid, are you? See through you. We can.
Your thoughts dwell on your mother.
I bet you miss your mom, pussy.
Afraid to lose her, I think.
And they tell him he's too old, and basically his heroes, like the people that he thought about as being his heroes and who he looked up to, are just a bunch of bullies that don't like him and tell him he sucks, besides Qui-Gon. And then Qui-Gon is his father figure that he was missing his whole life, and then Qui-Gon dies, and Obi-Wan, the guy that didn't want to train him, is now kind of stuck with training him. So you think about that initial backstory, it's like, man, I can see how Anakin turned towards the dark side. This first part makes sense to me. But then the execution of it is awful, because he's sitting there and he's hitting on Padme, and it's the worst dialogue you've ever heard with the most wooden acting, and it's super boring on Tatooine. His mom's name is Shmi for some reason. That's gotta be the worst name in all of Star Wars. That's not a big complaint, but it's just like, it's such a bad name. And it's just like, man, they took such a good premise, like on paper, and then the execution of it was terrible. And I think that's what the ugly of this movie is. Because we have the good stuff, we have the bad stuff, and then what's the ugly? The ugly is the fact that they took something that's really good when you think about it, but then the execution of it was done horribly. And I think that's the ugly of this movie. So overall, what I think of this movie, since this is like the first time I've watched it in over 5 years, I honestly didn't have a terrible time with it. It could be because this is the first time I've watched it since having seen the sequel trilogy, and so maybe I appreciate it more because there are some things in this movie that this movie does that the sequel trilogy does not, and that could be it. But I do have more of appreciation for it. It's not a good movie by any means. I don't love this movie, but I didn't have a bad time watching it. I actually enjoyed it. This movie might move up for me a bit in the ranking when I rank my Star Wars movies. If you guys missed it, I re-ranked all the Star Wars movies, and then I said I was going to rewatch every Star Wars movie and then rank them again if there's any changes, and that's why I'm starting off with The Phantom Menace. And yeah, I honestly had a good time with it. Again, not a good movie, but I did have some fun with it, and there are some cool moments in it, and I did enjoy some of the characters. I enjoyed Qui-Gon a lot more this time around because, like I said before, he's just a complete slime ball, and I love seeing that in a Jedi because you don't get that a whole lot. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Please let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of The Phantom Menace now, currently? When was the last time you watched it, and what do you think about it? And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see everyone later.